Okay, so before we start the texturing process, we may want to explode the model slightly, so we can have access to the covered up parts, such as the magazine and the barrel. Okay, so to do that, we can select the parts we want to move, Shift D to duplicate, and then move down or up, or whichever way you want to move it. I'll do it down in this case. Now we can select the export, and Control Shift R to re-import, or if you're on an older version, you can just hit Edit, project configuration, and reselect the low poly, and then hit OK and then OK. It should re-import. Right, so here's our exposed mesh. Also, we duplicated this so that the the position of the parts is still there. Because if you were to move it down without duplicating, add textures here and move it back up, it would screw up the textures because it's position based in Substance Painter. Alright, so we're going to hit F6 to go to orthographic mode, orthographic view. I find it easier to work with this. To switch between orthographic and perspective, you can hit F5 for perspective, F6 for orthographic, or this gizmo up here. You can switch. Also, just a quick little bit of advice: if you do find yourself that when you switch between the views, let's say your model gets zoomed out really far like this, or it's just absolutely gone and you can't find it in the viewfinder, you can just hit F to find the mesh and do a close-up of it. Alright, then let's start with the material. Create a new folder, call it metal, create 3 more folders, drag and drop them into metal. Bottom one we'll call height, middle one we'll call color, top one we'll call roughness. This is how I usually set up my materials so that I can have some organization to them. Okay, so we're going to create a fill layer in color, call it base. Take the normal and height off, we're not going to use that. Set the metallic to 1, and we set the color to whatever looks right in the reference material. There's a slight tint of yellow in the metal by the looks of things. Roughness we can also take off. Create a roughness base. Only use roughness for this one. You can alt left click to isolate the maps. In the reference it's quite shiny, but at the same time not too shiny, so maybe 0.35. Now in height we're going to create a base as well. Isolate the height. And we will set the workspace to height and set the layer blending mode to pass through. I will explain later why we do this. Alright, so we can go to grunge maps, find some sort of a grunge map that you like. Also we can, before we actually apply the texture, we can set the height to negative 0.2, maybe higher, 0.5. Create a black mask, right click the black mask, add a fill layer, and then drag and drop any grunge map or texture you want. Now we can adjust the pass through a bit to kind of get the texture for it. I think this is kind of nice, although in the reference material it's quite a grainy metal, so we can add another fill layer, find Pearl and Noise, drag and drop that in. Also, I forgot to mention with the fill texture, we can, instead of using UV projection, we can do triplanar to avoid seams, obvious seam lines. Alright, maybe increase the tiling to maybe 2. Maybe increase the strength to 25. Alright. Alright, so we're going to work with the Perlin noise now. We're going to set it to triplanar as well. Alright, so we're going to adjust the tiling. Or we can just increase the scale. And then also adjust the tiling to get really fine noise. And we can blend this either by subtracting or multiplying. And we can create another fill layer. This time get out white noise. Do the same. And we can also multiply this, or we can even screen it. You can mess around with these, see which one you like more. I think I'm going to put the grunge over the top. Actually, we're going to make the base of it the permanent noise. Then overlay the white noise on top of it. And then we're going to overlay the grunge over the top. Maybe we remove the white noise. Alright, so with this done, we can create a new fill layer in height. Call it mill lines. We're going to add some milling lines across the flat surfaces here, as it is in the reference image as well. So we select anisotropic noise, isolate height, set some negative height value, add a black mask, add a fill, drag and drop, triplanar. I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees so that the noise is all going in one way. And then I'm going to unlock the axes of tiling and ramp up the Y value, so it's more dense on the Y. Set it to pass through, and then overlay it. Now we don't want it the grind lines to be applied to everything in the model, so we're going to add another. We're going to add a paint layer. Hit 4 on the keyboard, and we're going to select this. First of all, we're going to select the mesh fill, set it to black, and then select the entire mesh. So if we alt left click over the mask, we can see nothing is selected. Then we're going to hit the UV chunk fill, set it to 1. And we will select the faces or UV islands we want to be grinded. As you can see, the top one, the top part here shouldn't be selected because there's a very obvious fine line here where the metal's been grinded off. We can remove it in the same fashion. Select the triangles, select black, and then just drag and drop over the pieces you don't want selected. Alright, once we have the mask, we can multiply this over the top, and here's our grind lines. Also, just a quick thing, we can create a white mask for the metal. Select the mesh fill, set it to black, and we're going to remove the plastic bits. As you can see down here on the magazine, it's also disabled. Well, the mask is applied here as well. That's because it's the same mesh using the same UV space. No matter that, doesn't matter that it's down here. Alright, so we're going to add more high detail. Some parts have a less noisy surface, so we're going to add a noise smooth layer, set it to normal, so that it overlays on top. As you can see, it completely takes out all the detail. We're going to create a black mask and apply it to the areas that do not have such a strong surface texture. I'll take the magazine out of it because it's stamped steel, not actually milled. Missing a triangle here for some reason, so that's probably from this. Yep. So sometimes you may click through, or for example if you box select like this, you may go onto the other side, so you need to be careful with that. Click through also happens often. Alright. Also we can do vertical mill lines for the serrations here on the side whilst we're here. So we can Control D duplicate that. Mill lines vertical, rename that. Then we can take the anisotropic noise, rotate it so it's in line with the serrations. Select the paint. Again, reset the mask by selecting everything with black. And going into Island select. And then just quickly enable these. You can also enable a mirror modifier here. Yeah, let me just show you that real quick. So we're going to again reset this. So if you want to apply the same mask, texture, paint, whatever, onto the other side of the model, you can select this symmetry here, and if you, it should come up with this red line in the middle. If it's not in the middle, you can click the settings here and then adjust it wherever you want it to be. In my case, it was kind of middle, but then I offset it too much. It doesn't have to be perfect unless you want to go for perfect symmetry, but we're not going for that right here, so we can just remove that and then just start adding these back. And because symmetry is enabled, you can see on the other side it's also working. Now you can see that the mill lines here and here, they have a very sharp edge to them. We can remove that by going into the black mask, adding a generator, selecting UV border, bringing down the balance a bit, distance as well. And then put a blur filter on top of that to kind of smooth it out, but not too much. Alright, and now we can set the border distance to subtract. So as you can see, it kind of takes away the uniformity from it. We can copy and paste this onto the other mills as well. Although in this case it's a bit too much, so we can bring the distance down. Alright, hit save. Right, now let's get onto the markings. So we create another fill layer, call it markings, height only, set negative height, black mask. This time we're just going to leave it as it is. We're going to find our marking stencil, which I will also keep included into the folder you can download with the reference images, so you can follow along the tutorial. Right, so with the mask selected, we can scroll down a bit until we find stencil over here. We can drag and drop that into the stencil, and we're met with this. So you can hold S for stencil to manipulate it, adjust it, rotate it. So you can hold S and left mouse click to rotate. If you hold shift, it does it with increments. Hold S with the middle mouse button, the scroll wheel, you can move it. And if you hold S and hit right click, you can scale it. Right, so in the so we're going to add the Kimber logo here, just like on the reference material. We're going to try to align it the best we can, although it doesn't have to be perfect. And then we just pretty much paint over it. If you don't see it working with paint, you may have to check your grayscale. So you have to set it to 1 and then paint it over. Alright, now the other side. Alright, so for some reason it doesn't let me paint onto the barrel here. So we can just move it down here and then paint on this area. Seems to work for some reason, I have no clue why that's the case. Alright, so now we can do the other markings. We also added a fake serial number for this, if you want to use that. If you don't, that's also fine. And then there's one more 9mm marking on the magazine, I think. Okay, so now we're done with the stencil. We can remove it. To do so, you can just click X on the stencil area, and that's it. Okay, markings are done. Now let's get onto the patterns. There's a couple different high details we can add here. Alright, let's do some high detail to the rear sight. Add a black mask, add a fillet to the black mask. We find ourselves gradient linear 2, drag that into the texture, set it to planar. I'm going to go into mask view to quickly see how the orientation is. This seems fine. I'm going to scale it out like this, rotate it, position it here, repeat only vertically. I'm gonna adjust the contrast so it's more of a line, I guess. Increase the toning as well. Now we're gonna add a paint layer, then just isolate then we're gonna just isolate everything. We can also paint onto it, which we will have to. So in the reference it's just a couple lines like these on the rear side. You can leave some fall off here so it looks like it's been milled out on the side and there's just some grooves there. Looks kind of okay. We may want to increase a bit more tiling though, and fix up any leakage issues up top. Now we can do the same thing for the trigger. I'm gonna get rid of the paint layer. Move this over to the trigger area. Add a paint layer. Isolate the face of the trigger. And we do kind of need to use the same thing again for the safety ridges. So remove the paint layer, move it to the safety. This time the ridges are a bit big, so we do this, add the paint. Then I'm gonna slightly delete this this bit on the side. Now we need to add the grip texture here, so we can create a new fill layer. Alright, so I've already made a height map for this. This will also be included in the download file. So now we can create a planar projection, remove repeat, and we're gonna quickly see which way it's facing. Yeah, it seems to be facing the correct way. Although we will need some repeating vertically though. Alright, let's get it done until it's something similar to the reference. Add a paint layer. Alright, some more high detail we can add is into the little paint dots for the rear side, right and front side. For this we can do same thing again. Add a black mask. This time we're going to look for anisotropic radial. We're going to add it into the fill layer. Set it to planar projection. Scale it down. Align it. Remove repetition. Position in the middle like this. I'm going to scale it down so it doesn't interfere with the other one. Copy paste it. Move over to the side. Copy paste it again. Move it to the front side. Now we add a paint layer. Okay, so as you can see, there's a bit of an issue. If you look at the black mask, only one at a time can be seen for some reason. So to avoid that, we can just set this to Just scroll down through the blend modes until you find something that works. In this case it does work, and it's linear dodge, I believe. Yeah, linear dodge add. And now we can do the paint layer correctly. Right, and one more piece of high detail we can add is barrel rifling. Because we didn't model it, so we can add it in the texture. I'm gonna hit F1, so it shows both the 3D and UV. For this we're gonna use UV projection. Isolate height, again, set a negative value. Black mask. Fill. This time we're gonna look for stripes. Drag and drop. Before we do that, I'm going to add I'm not going to add no layer. I'm just going to go to the black mask, hit 4, select the UV chunk selection, and then just select the inside of the barrel. And we can find the barrel here. Now we can enable stripes, hit multiply, and it'll be here. As you can see, already kind of works. Can't really see. No, yeah, we can see obvious tiling. So to avoid the tiling issues, we can just scale it down a bit. Remove repeat. And once this is once you've scaled and positioned it correctly, you can rotate it either way until you find some sort of area where the tiling isn't as bad. Alright, because we put the seam at the top of the barrel, it's quite likely that you would see it. Plus, with the running we're going to do, you're not going to see much of rifling, other than like the front bit here. Alright, so here it is. We can add a slight blur filter if we wanted to kind of smooth out the shape. Also, as you can see, again, it's a very sharp, harsh end over here. So to remove that, we can add another fill layer. This time set it to planar. Find gradient. Drag and drop linear gradient 1. Also, we can hit F2 to go back to 3D because we don't need the UVs anymore. I'm going to isolate the mask, rotate it, scale it down, remove repetition, and then position it at the front of the barrel. Scale it down on the Z-axis, and we can hit subtract. So now you can see it kind of smooths it off, which I think works fine. We can scale up to make the fall off even bigger. Or we can use multiply. So instead of subtracting, you can multiply, which seems to be slightly better effect, because you don't see the line as much. Okay, we've done most of the high detail. Just one quick note, we're going to go back to the markings. As you can see, they're also quite sharp. Find the markings layer. We can add a filter, blur, to the black mask. Blur it slightly, so it's less aggressive and sharp. Gives a more natural look. There's also multiple ways of achieving a stamped or milled markings. In this case, we're just going to use basic. I believe these are milled, so there's no ridges going up and then back down into the trench like a stamped metal would usually do. So we're just going to leave it for this for now. Like this for now. Okay, and we're going to quickly create a new material. Call it plastic. 3 folders again. Same structure. height, color, and rough. Add a black mask. Add it to the grips and the magazine extension. Add a base color so that we can see what we're doing. This time it's going to be plastic, non-metallic. Set the roughness to something like 0.25. Set the color to black or dark gray. Okay, in roughness, we don't need it yet. We go to height. We're going to do a base height. It looks like smooth plastic, but of course nothing in life is perfect, so we can do some sort of very faint grunge. So find whatever you think looks good. I'm just going to drag and drop this on. This looks okay. Set it to triplanar. And then adjust the opacity of it. It looks like the scratches are raised, so I'm going to invert it. Looks better. And of course don't make it too strong. Not strong enough that you can't see it. Okay, we're going to add the grip pattern now. Create a new fill layer. Call it diamond pattern. Give it a height, texture, planar projection. Set it down to something like maybe 7. Orient it, position it, adjust it correctly as you want. Okay, once we've set the pattern up, we can add a black mask. Set these UV islands up, and then we need to remove the front and back triangles. Alright, so here it is. We do see a very sudden change in height here, but we can adjust that by creating a generator on the black mask, giving a UV border distance, then playing around with the settings. Give it a blur to smooth it out, and then we set the UV border distance to subtract, so this kind of smooths off the edge a bit, but you can see also removes it from here. We don't want to remove it from the inside, we only want to remove it from the sides. So to do that, we're going to add a paint layer just on top of the UV border, and we're going to paint over the edges here. Okay, so now we added height where we don't want, so we're going to create another paint layer. And then just set these areas to black. Also, we haven't done this bit. So quickly do this bit. It may be a bit too strong, so we can just remove the, reduce the opacity a bit. Okay, there it is. Alright, so we're done with pretty much all the height data we will be working with. Actually, no. We're missing couple tiny more details I forgot to add. At the magazine. So we need to find the stencil again. Actually no, we can just, instead of creating a new fill layer, we can go back down to markings. We find our stencil, apply that. The magazine does have some number indication here. Right, these are quite strong, and in the magazine reference they're quite weak indentations, so to do that what we can do is create a paint layer, set it to 0.5, just paint over it. Or in fact we can probably, instead of doing grey, we can just do straight black, paint over it, and set overlay. Or multiply, and then reduce the opacity of it so that the mask is weaker and it's not as strong. And I think that looks fine. Okay, and we need to add a diamond pattern to the magazine release as well now. Okay, once this is set up, we can add to the black mask a fill layer. Find gradient, drag and drop that in, planar. Set it to multiply, and then just kind of move it up. So there's some kind of a fading onto the height. Alright, and with that done, that's pretty much all the high detail we'll be doing for this project. From now on we can move on to colors and roughness. Okay, so now we're going to get onto the color of the metal material. So we're going to take the base, add a fill layer, and then we're going to add some surface variation to it. We can grab a grunge map of any sorts. And just pick this random one. It's a bit too aggressive. Could want something subtle, but not too subtle. Yeah, something like this perhaps. Increase the tiling a bit. And then overlay the color. And make it fairly subtle. So here's the color view and you can just about see it. Then we're going to do different colors now. So first we're going to start with dark metal. So we'll take anything that is dark metal and add a white mask to it. And then kind of try to match the look of the reference. This seems kind of okay. And there's grey metal. So for areas such as these. Then there is a blue tinted metal for the slide. Just add a very subtle amount of blue tint. Maybe that was a bit too much. Something like this. Actually, from the base grunge map, we're going to remove that, and we're going to put it over the top of these different color variations as well. Instead of having on just one color, we're going to actually put on all of them. So for now, we're going to have to remove it. Alright, so color-wise, I think this is good. Now we're going to add some grunge. Now we're going to do some very faint edge wear. So, color, set it to pure white, set the blend mode to screen, and then we're going to find ourselves an edge mask. I usually use Edges Dusty. Max out the curvature, add sharp corners to the curvature, max out texture 2 to make it brighter. And I kind of play around until you find some edge that you like. In my case I like this. Then we're going to take the screen and lower the opacity of it. So in the base color it gives a very faint edge highlight. In the actual material view it's not that visible. Well, it's not too visible, but it is still tiny bit visible, which kind of helps sell from certain angles the material. Also, right, as you can see in the black mask, you don't see the markings being picked up in the height data. So to make the height details be picked up in the mask, we need to go back down to height, create a new empty fill layer, call it height anchor, and then of course set it to pass through, right click and then add anchor point. Now we'll go back to the edge mask, go all the way down, add micro height, anchor points, height anchor, reference channel, height, go back up slightly, find the micro details drop down, and select micro height. And here you can see now it picks up the details that it didn't previously. So it's very subtle, very faint, but it's there. We can adjust some settings to make it more intensive, which I think this kind of looks cool, so I might keep it like this. And we can also duplicate this, and now set it the blending mode to overlay, set the color to black, call it cavity, go back to the mask editor, find your curvature, and then change the mode from edges to cavities. And here you can see we're adding some darkness to the texture now. Well, that's a bit too dark. Also, usually for cavity I do try to take off the texture, so it's kind of more uniform. And then we can adjust the overlay opacity. So we don't want it to be too subtle, but at the same time not too eye pokey. So I think this is kind of good. Here you can see the difference with and without. Just adds very subtle ambient occlusion basically. Right. I think I may remove the vertical midlines. They're kind of too distracting. So now material recalculated, looks better. Alright. Okay, kind of looking at the side color, I think it's still too blue. So I'm going to adjust it a bit. Yeah, that's better, I think. Okay, so that's pretty much we're done with color. We could add some very faint grunge. I'm just gonna experiment here just to see if it looks good. If it doesn't, we'll probably not have it. So only affect the color. Select occlusion, dust occlusion. And it's kind of meh. Yeah, you can see the inside of the barrel is absolutely occluded, so it's full black. We can of course play with the settings a little bit. Maybe try find something something we may like. You can also add the anchor point height to this as well, if you wanted to. You can pretty much do it to any mask. So you go now, it really fills into the cracks. I think it's a bit too much, but that's no worries, we're just gonna play around with it a little bit more. I'm gonna exaggerate it like this, and then you can drop down the opacity of it to kind of add slightly more variation to the texture, although I think it's a bit too much. We can also adjust the blending mode. Maybe there's a better way of blending it together. Soft light could perhaps work, yeah. It's very subtle, but you can see it if you're looking for it, especially in the markings. Okay, so that's the color. I think we may change the plastic grip color a bit to make it more darker. Okay, so there's our color map. We're gonna add some height, some highlights on the grip as well. So we need to add grip anchor, make it only height, make it pass through, give it the anchor. We can copy and paste the edge and cavity over to the grip's color. As you can see, it's using a different anchor point, so it's not really what we want. Easy fix for that is to go to each mask and change the micro height anchor. So we're going to use grip anchor, set it to height, then go back to the other one as well. Alright, and here's the effect. It's quite strong, so we can drop the screen opacity a bit. So it's still there, but it's not really stabbing us in the eye. Although this we could probably ramp up. Yeah, I think it looks good. Just check the mag here. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, now once the color's done, we can move on to roughness. I'm gonna go back to the metal, set the space to roughness, and we're gonna add fill layer. We can call this imperfections. Use only roughness mode. One little thing I like to use, a trick I like to use is keep the roughness value like this. Don't actually put texture into the roughness. We can just create a black mask and then fill it. Pretty much what we've done with the height stuff as well, and color. Now with the fill layer we can add a grunge map. So we're going to put this concrete for the time being, just to display. So now we're in roughness view. And then we can ramp it up or down. And it pretty much masks, the texture is the mask. So we have still full control of the roughness underneath. So we can try find a interesting surface. Grunge. Could probably go for wipes. That's a roughness mode. Set the blend to either overlay or soft light. We can add another fill layer. Call it fingers. Same thing for here. We create a black mask. And then we look for fingerprints. We can add that over the top. Do try to match the size of the fingerprints relative to the size of the object you're putting it on. So for example here, the fingers are not this small in real life. There'd be some around this size almost. Yeah. Right, so this is the roughness, overlay. Although we could probably use a different texture for that. I'll probably use a custom fingerprints texture. This looks way better. You can actually see the individual markings. We can also experiment with some noise for the roughness to make it look slightly more specular, I guess. So we can add white noise. As you can see, the effect is very, very strong, so we can adjust the blending. Now we can also do the same thing as we did with the color. We can add a edge highlight. So we give it a edge dusty black mask. And then we fiddle with that. This time I'm going to leave the micro details out because we want to capture the big shapes. Again, we're going to overlay this and then adjust the opacity. So it's just a slight little highlight. We can do the similar thing with cavities, but make it rough instead. So now with this enabled, the more occluded areas will not be as shiny. Just simulate a bit of faint dust or just a lack of touch or cleaning to it. Right, so I want the surface to have some little amount of scratches, so I'm going to add a new fill layer. This time I'm just going to drag and drop this into roughness. Alright, so you can use the scratches that come with Substance Painter, but in this case I'm just going to use one of the custom apps I've downloaded. So there's, you can see very faint little speckles and scratches. I think that's good. Okay, then we're gonna do the same for the grip. Again, you can find a grunge map, or you can use a custom map. In my case, I'll do a custom map. On top of that, I'm gonna add fingerprints. So we're going to set the blend mode to lighten, so it takes all the light details, which is rough, and then overlays on top. Maybe find a more interesting part of the texture. I think that's good. I think we should still add another layer of fingerprints to the frame. And now we're pretty much done with the entire texture. Actually, no, we need to add the color for the what's it called? The painted highlights for the rear side. So quickly go back to color. That thing looks fine, yep. If we wanted to, we could add a tiny bit of dirt to make it less perfectly new. So something like a dusty color. Okay, so for the dirt, you can either use a dust or dirt mask, or you can create a black mask and then give it a generator and select dirt. It's very strong. Also, we should put the dirt into each layer individually because we can adjust the micro detail. And then give it the correct anchor. Alright, and now we can mess with the dirt settings until we find something that we like. So once we added the mask, we can also break it up slightly by adding a fill layer and then finding a grunge map you prefer. Then either subtracting or multiplying it on top of the dirt mask. Right, then I'm gonna copy and paste this over to the grip as well. Alright, so that's pretty much the texture for it. Although there's one little thing we could add if we wanted to. So if you go to these filters, you can find matte finish rough. Just drag and drop it over the layers. You can see it creates this effect on the normals layer, which is quite interesting. So it's not roughness, but from certain angles, because of the normal that it affects, it creates this interesting finish. You can either use this filter like this, or if you want to make your own, you can just create a empty fill layer, call it coat or whatever, and make it only normal. Then give it a fill, make that only normal as well, and then grab your any map you want. I'll grab this for the moment. I'll set it triplanar, and then change this to overlay, and then really ramp down the oh no, this is the base color. So move over to normal, set this to overlay, and then ramp it all the way down, and you pretty much achieve the same effect. And you can do this with essentially any grunge map, any pattern. You can even paint on this, I'm pretty sure. So it's there on very like specific angles, maybe even a 2 actually. So on some very specific angles you can see it, but not all of them. You can also do it for the plastic, but I'm going to leave the plastic out of this for this whole thing. Also, to spice up your texture at the end of making it, you can drag and drop a sharpness filter on top. Now you do want to be careful with it. You don't want to ramp the intensity too high, because then you're going to hurt your eyes. So I recommend going to the roughness, for example, and you can see how the fingerprints are quite blurry. So just ramp up the sharpness up a little bit until they're like well defined. That's kind of the baseline I usually go for. And then there you go.